based on a tip that came in last night through the night, investigators began the process of following up on that tip this morning, starting around 10 o'clock this morning, following up on that tip. And the tip was very specific that led us back to this location here today.
They found her in a shallow grave behind an abandoned school, barely covered, as if someone wanted her to be found. 23-year-old Kada Scott had vanished just days earlier, leaving her family desperate for answers. But what's chilling is that police had already searched that area for a week and found nothing. So how did Kada's body suddenly appear right where investigators had just been looking? Someone moved her. Someone wanted to send a message. And the deeper you look into this case, the cryptic phone calls, the strange social media activity, and the people who suddenly started knowing too much, the more it starts to feel like Kada never stood a chance. They found her, but not how anyone hoped. In a shallow grave, barely covered by loose dirt and fallen leaves, like someone didn't even bother to hide what they'd done. 23-year-old Kada Scott's remains were discovered behind an abandoned middle school in Germantown, and the scene was nothing short of chilling. No care, no burial, no mercy, just a young woman discarded in the open as if her life meant nothing. But here's where things get twisted. Police had already searched that exact area. For nearly a week, officers combed through the woods behind that old school, using dogs, drones, and manpower. They searched it over and over, and each time they came up empty. And yet suddenly, a few days later, after an anonymous call comes in overnight, they go back, and there she is, right out in the open. Now, tell me how that makes sense. You're telling me trained officers, crime scene experts, people whose job is to notice the smallest trace of evidence, somehow missed a body just feet from where they'd been standing? Witnesses say Kada wasn't buried deep. Her body was shallowly covered, visible once you knew where to look. That's not something you overlook. That's something that was put there later. Someone moved her. Someone wanted her to be found, but only after they were long gone. And that anonymous tip? Too specific, too clean. The kind of information that doesn't come from a random passerby. Whoever called knew exactly where to point police. Almost like they were guiding them, or finishing a story they'd already started. When the news broke, the community was stunned. People thought maybe she'd been found alive, that this nightmare had somehow ended in relief. But that hope was crushed the moment authorities confirmed the truth. And the timing, the sudden discovery after days of dead ends, it raised more questions than answers. Who moved her? Why there? Why now? Because if police had already been through that area, then we're not just talking about a tragedy. We're talking about a cover-up. Someone knew where Kada was the entire time. Someone waited until the heat died down. And then, when it was safe, they made sure she'd finally be found. But found by who? And on whose terms? October 4th started out like any other day for Kada Scott. She kissed her mother goodbye, said she was heading to work at the nursing home just a few minutes away, the same routine she'd followed for months. There was nothing unusual, no argument, no sense of dread. Just another quiet morning in Philadelphia, and a mother watching her daughter head off to work, not realizing it would be the last time she'd ever see her alive. Kada was a caregiver, the kind of person people describe as soft-spoken but strong. Friends said she had a calming energy that made patients love her. She worked hard, kept to herself, and spent her days helping elderly residents who needed a little kindness. That day, she clocked in like normal. She even checked in with coworkers. But then something strange happened. She left her shift before it was over. No one knows why. She didn't tell anyone she was going home, and she didn't clock out properly. She just disappeared. When she didn't show up the next day, her family knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Kada. She was dependable to a fault, the kind of person who texted her mom if she was even 10 minutes late. So when the calls went unanswered and her phone went dark, her family panicked. By the next evening, she was officially reported missing. And that's when the puzzle pieces started to fall, and not in the way anyone expected. Her car was still at home, untouched. Her purse was missing, but her wallet and some personal items were left behind. Even stranger, some of her social media posts suddenly disappeared. Not by police, who typically preserve accounts during investigations. Someone had access. Someone deleted things. But here's the part that haunts people the most. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Kada had told friends she'd been getting strange calls. Someone had been harassing her, watching her, reaching out in ways that made her uneasy. She never said exactly who it was, only that she felt like she was being followed. Some brushed it off as paranoia. Others told her to go to the police. But Kada, quiet, private, and non-confrontational, kept it to herself. It wasn't until after she vanished that police connected her to a man named King, someone she had been communicating with shortly before she disappeared. Phone records showed she likely met with him the night she left work early. And from that point on, everything about her routine life, the caring nurse's aide, the girl who always checked in, the daughter who never missed a call, suddenly unraveled into silence. Her mother would later say she kept replaying that morning in her head. Every word, every glance, wondering if she missed a sign. But there was nothing to see. Kada walked out the door like she always did, smiling, focused, alive. And then she was gone. Once the initial shock of Kada's disappearance set in, the details that began to surface were deeply unsettling. Friends said that in the week before she vanished, Kada had started acting anxious, looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected calls, and telling people she felt like someone was following her. She confided in a few close friends that a man had been harassing her over the phone, calling from block numbers, sometimes not saying anything at all, just breathing. Other times, she'd hang up and tell people, "I think it's him again." But no one knew who him was. That's when a name surfaced, King, a man who, according to investigators, had been in contact with Kada shortly before she disappeared. Their connection was still murky. Some say they had mutual friends, others say they met online. What's clear is that Kada had been communicating with him on the very day she went missing. Police believe she may have left work early to meet him. Not long after she was reported missing, police issued a statement asking the public to help locate King's car, a 1999 metallic gold Toyota Camry, Pennsylvania plates MSX0797. They believe Kada might have been seen in or near that vehicle before she disappeared. The sighting lit up social media. Photos of the car spread fast, and people started speculating, retracing every possible route between the nursing home and her neighborhood. Then came the first strange discovery. Police found the car abandoned in an apartment complex parking lot, miles away from where Kada was last seen. The windows were up, doors locked, and no signs of struggle inside. To most, that might sound like nothing, but to investigators, it screamed staged. It felt like someone had wanted that car to be found, but not Kada. From there, the case started to spiral into chaos. Two separate tips came into police within 24 hours, one leading them to an abandoned elementary school, another directing them toward the gold Camry. At first, the leads felt like progress. But when the school search turned up personal belongings, a cell phone case, an iPad case, glasses, and a card bearing Kada's name, everything shifted. Those items weren't hidden. They were lying near the woods, almost like breadcrumbs. Online, the story exploded. People started picking apart every post, every deleted photo, every inconsistency in the timeline. Some swore they'd seen her phone's activity change after she was reported missing, suggesting someone still had access to her accounts. Others noticed her Instagram and Facebook stories quietly disappearing after her family had already gone public. At that point, the public was no longer just following a missing persons case. They were unraveling a digital mystery. And through it all, one question kept echoing. Who was King, and how deep was his connection to Kada Scott? Because the way her story was unfolding didn't feel random. It felt planned. Every clue, every call, every discovery, too precise, too calculated. And the more people learned about King, the more they began to wonder if this wasn't his first time making someone disappear. Days passed. The search for Kada Scott stretched into its 6th day, and the city was holding its breath. Flyers were plastered across Germantown. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, and police said they were following every lead. But then out of nowhere, everything changed. In the early hours of the morning, investigators received an anonymous tip. Not a vague, check the park kind of message. This one was detailed, precise. The caller didn't just tell them where to look, they described the exact area behind an abandoned school, even referencing a section of woods past the tree line near a fallen fence. Now, who gives directions like that unless they've been there? By mid-morning, police were back on the grounds of the Ada H. Lewis Middle School, a building that's been shut down for years and now sits like a ghost in the middle of the neighborhood. Boarded windows, cracked pavement, overgrown grass swallowing the yard. They had been there before, combing through the brush, scanning for any sign of Kada. But this time felt different. The energy was tense, heavy. They moved quickly, guided straight to one particular patch of ground. And then, within minutes, they found it. A shallow grave. Buried under a thin layer of dirt and debris were human remains. Items nearby, a phone case, a pair of glasses, an identification card, all pointed to one horrifying truth. It was Kada, but here's where everything twists. Officers on scene admitted privately that they had already searched that same area earlier in the week. Cadaver dogs had passed through. Ground units had swept it. There was nothing there, which means one of two things. Either every single trained investigator somehow missed a body lying nearly in plain sight, or someone placed her there after the search ended. Think about that. If Kada's body wasn't there during the first search, then whoever did this had to be watching. They had to know when police were coming and when they left. And when things quieted down, when everyone thought the trail had gone cold, that's when they brought her back, placed her behind that abandoned school, almost like they were mocking the investigation, almost like they wanted her to be found. Even the police statement had a strange tone, calling it a heartbreaking development, while emphasizing that the tip was very specific. Too specific, if you ask anyone paying attention. And it leaves us with one haunting question. Was this the end of Kada's story, or just the beginning of a cover-up? Because whoever called in that tip didn't just know where she was, they knew when it was safe to find her. If the discovery of Kada Scott's body raised eyebrows, what came next had people side-eyeing everyone connected to her name. Because once investigators started pulling at the threads, what unraveled wasn't just a case. It was a web of secrets, lies, and connections that made the whole thing feel even darker. Kian King's connection. Let's start with the obvious name on everyone's lips, Kian King. From the start, he was the one person consistently linked to Kada. Police confirmed they had been in contact the day she vanished, and phone records suggested they may have even met up that night. But who was Kian King? Because the deeper people dug, the uglier it got. This wasn't his first time being connected to violence against women. In fact, earlier this year, Kian was charged in another horrifying case, one that now feels like a warning no one paid attention to. Prosecutors alleged that Kian had kidnapped a woman outside her home, forced her into her car, assaulted her, and later released her. The case was dismissed only because the victim failed to appear in court. But now, that same incident is being revisited because the pattern is impossible to ignore. Both cases involved women who knew him. Both started with harassment. Both ended in terror. And this time, one of them didn't make it home. People are asking, how many red flags have to wave before someone stops pretending not to see them? How did a man accused of kidnapping and strangling a woman walk free long enough to be tied to another missing persons case? It's not just suspicious, it's systemic failure. And if Kian had a pattern of predatory behavior, it raises a terrifying question. Was Kada his next target, or was there something about her specifically that made this personal? Gabby's contradictions. Then there's Gabby, the name that suddenly popped up online once people started connecting dots. And her story, well, it doesn't sit right with anyone. Gabby claims she barely knew Kada, says they grew up in the same neighborhood, that she was closer to Kada's younger sister, and that she and Kada only ever exchanged 6 words in their whole lives. Fine. But then she drops the bombshell. She was friends with Kian King. Not only that, she admits that Kian called her right before Kada disappeared, asking if she knew her. Now let's pause there. What kind of man randomly calls a female friend asking about another woman in the neighborhood? A woman who would turn up dead just days later? That's not casual conversation. That's calculated. And when people pressed Gabby for answers online, she didn't stay silent. She posted a long, emotional clarification, claiming she didn't know anything and that she only spoke to Kian for 29 seconds. But the timing of that post made everything worse, because she wrote it after people noticed she'd made cryptic comments earlier, hinting at Kada's death before police even confirmed it. Let that sink in. She seemed to know Kada was gone before the world did. And instead of clearing things up, Gabby's statement left even more questions. Why was she so defensive? Why mention street code? Around here, we don't talk to cops, if she had nothing to hide. And why would someone who barely knew Kada even feel the need to address the situation so thoroughly? People online weren't buying it. The general consensus? Gabby knew more than she was saying. Whether she was trying to protect herself, Kian, or someone else entirely, her version of events didn't add up. And if she was the one Kian reached out to before everything went down, what exactly did he tell her? The brother's strange behavior. Now let's talk about Kada's brother, because this part of the story has everyone scratching their heads. According to multiple witnesses, when people tried to enter the nursing home during the early days of the search, Kada's brother was seen coming out, acting erratic, yelling at people, even reportedly pulling out a weapon and telling them to get back. That reaction made no sense. His sister was missing. The community was trying to help. So why act like he had something to protect or something to hide? People who were there say the moment felt tense, hostile, and wrong. It wasn't the reaction of a grieving sibling desperate for answers. It was defensive, almost territorial. Like he didn't want anyone near that building. And it wasn't just the outburst. It was where it happened. The nursing home was the last place Kada was seen alive. If her brother was there, why? Was he searching for her? Or was there another reason he was lurking around the property? It's all speculation for now, but the behavior raised enough eyebrows to make people wonder if the tragedy hit closer to home than anyone wants to believe. When you put it all together, Kian's violent past, Gabby's contradictions, and the brother's outburst, it stops looking like a simple case of abduction and starts to feel like a tangled web of secrets and lies. Everyone connected to Kada seems to be saying just enough to sound innocent, but not enough to be believed. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated, and whoever was behind it had help. When the public found out who police were questioning and what was already on his record, the outrage was immediate. Because this wasn't a man with a clean slate. This was a man with history. A man who'd already been accused of doing almost the exact same thing to another woman, just months before Kada Scott vanished. Her name hasn't been widely shared to protect her privacy, but the court documents are there. They tell a story almost too familiar. Kian King allegedly kidnapped, strangled, and assaulted another woman. She managed to escape. She lived. She went to police, pressed charges, and the case made it to court. But before justice could even touch him, the case was dismissed because the victim didn't show up. Now, whether she was too scared, threatened, or pressured, we may never know. But one thing's clear, her silence cost another woman her life. Because the system let Kian King walk right back into the world, free, emboldened, and ready to do it again. And that's the part that burns. How does a man accused of kidnapping and strangling a woman walk free long enough to do it again? How many red flags have to fly before the system admits it failed? The state had a chance to stop him, a paper trail of violence, a pattern anyone could see, and they did nothing. It's negligence, plain and simple. Not just from one judge, one prosecutor, or one cop, but from an entire system that looked away. Because when women disappear, it's never just the killer who's guilty. It's every warning sign ignored along the way. If the first victim had been protected, if the system had followed through, if someone had cared enough to keep Kian King behind bars, Kada Scott might still be alive today. And that's the part no one in power wants to admit. Now we're left with fragments, questions that no one seems willing to answer. Was this preventable? Were the police misled during their search? Or were they told to stand down? Who made that anonymous call that led them to Kada's body? And why only after she'd been moved? And most haunting of all, how many more women did the system fail to protect before it was too late? Because when you look past the headlines and the crime scene tape, you see a pattern, not just of violence, but of indifference. A young woman cried for help. Another survived to tell what he did. And still, nothing changed. Kada's story isn't just about what was done to her. It's about everything that wasn't done for her. The missed chances, the ignored pleas, the silence that let a predator keep walking free. And maybe Kada's story isn't just about one woman's tragedy. Maybe it's a warning about what happens when the signs are ignored.